Hello again. As you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy, and today's class is adding servers to a Windows Server 2012 Active Directory network. So by this point, we've already installed our first server. We've added Active Directory, we've added DNS, we have added DHCP, we have added new computers to the domain, new client computers to the domain, we have added clients, so on and so forth, but we have not yet added any new servers. So again, I know with you guys, especially if you're new, you think servers are like a really big deal. It's like, wow, a server. But in the real world, once you get out to the enterprise environment, I worked on a single project where we deployed 200 servers into a data center for one project. It was one client. We did hosted solutions, and they needed 200 new 1U servers, and we had to put them all in, make them all part of the domain, and go through all of that mess. So once you start dealing with the enterprise world, servers become a core component of the network that you're going to be dealing with. Now, if you're in a real enterprise world and you have a real budget, generally, all servers should be created to do specific tasks, hopefully, in a real enterprise environment where you have lots of money. So you will have servers, clusters of servers, that will only do Active Directory. You will have servers that only do DNS. You will have servers that only do DHCP. You will have servers who only do file sharing, who only do IIS, who only do Microsoft SQL. So in the real enterprise world, every one of these individual server services will be provided by its own Windows server, or sometimes Linux or Unix server. I will warn you though, in the non-enterprise world, in the small business world, in the mid-sized business world, where money is considered valuable, where $600 or $5,000 is nothing to sneeze at, many times in those environments, you'll have one server or you'll have two servers, and they will have to do everything. So one of the things that I want you guys to think about and realize is that the way that you build your network will be based as much upon the budget and the equipment and resources that you have available as the actual technology that you can use. So I've had some of my fans, some of my followers talking about, I talked about creating a file share on the Active Directory server before. I talked about allowing roaming profiles to be stored on the Active Directory server before. And some of the fans said, no, you never do that. No, you would never do that. Well, it depends. What's your budget? How much money do you have? What environment are you dealing with? So overall, in general, you would want to have your own file server separate from your own Active Directory server. But in the real world, sometimes all you get is one box, and that one server has to do everything. But hopefully, you guys have a little bit of a budget, and so you're going to be able to add servers to the network. So today, what I'm going to show you is basically how to add a new server to your domain. Now, this is a very simple process. It is no big deal. So the server that I'm going to show you is a fresh install of Windows Server 2012. So by this point, you should already know how to install Windows Server 2012. All I've done is installed Windows Server 2012 onto my virtual machine. So basically, we have one instance of Windows Server 2012, and I have done nothing else. So you should know how to do that already. All that's going to happen after that is, so we've installed Windows Server 2012. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our Active Directory server. So our server that deals with Active Directory. We're going to go to Active Directory users and computers, and we are going to create a new computer account for the server that we just created. So I'm going to create a server called File, or a computer called File, in Active Directory users and computers. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that new server that we built. I'm going to go to System. From there, you can change the workgroup or domain it's part of. I'm going to change that. We're going to go through a little reboot process. Then I'm going to log in with the ETCG, the domain administrator account, and then that server will be part of the domain. Now, one of the big things that I want you to remember with how Microsoft servers work and how servers work in general is we are now going to have a server. That server is now going to be part of the domain. And it is now going to do what for the domain? Can you answer what this new server is going to do for the domain? It's going to do nothing, because we have not yet installed any server services onto the server. We have not configured it to do anything. So this server, by the time we finish this class, it will be a server, and it will be a member of the domain, and that's about all you can say for it. We will go into other classes where, using a server like this, we will configure it to be a file server or an IIS server or any of the other servers that we'll be dealing with. But right now, basically, I'm just going to show you how to make it part of the domain so that from that point forward you can start playing with it and turn it into whatever kind of server you want it to be. So let's go over to the computer right now so I can show you how all this works, because again, it's pretty simple, but you know, this is just one of those kinds of classes that we just got to do. So right now, this is my Windows 8 computer, and again, as I say, I use VirtualBox in order to administer my virtual computers. And down at the bottom, you'll see I have two instances of servers open. So I have this 2012 server. That's the server that we've been dealing with. This is my Active Directory server. And then I have this file server. So this is the brand new server that I created, and there's nothing on it. It's just 2012 server. So what we're going to do first is we are going to go over to my Active Directory server. So this is the Active Directory server. And again, we're going to need to go to Active Directory Users and Computers. So we open up Server Manager and we go to Tools. From here, we go down to Active Directory Users and Computers. So this is the same MMC that we've used. I think this is like the 10th time we've used this thing, so you should be getting pretty comfortable with it now. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to Computers. So Computers is where we're going. And what we need to do is we need to right-click on Computers. We need to do New, and we need to do Computer. So we are creating a new computer account for this domain. So I am going to call this computer File. So I believe in very, very simple server names. Remember, as an administrator, you're probably going to have to hand type in whatever server name you give these servers a zillion times, maybe a zillion and one times. So the longer and more esoteric you make these names, the more obnoxious you're making your own job. It's not going to make your users' lives any worse. It's not going to make your CEO's life any worse. It is going to make your life worse. So if you notice, how I name my servers is pretty dirt simple. One, so I can remember what all my servers do, and two, so it's really easy to type in to the UNC to say, oh, I need to get to a share on the file server, whack whack file, whack share. That's really easy to type. You know, if it's whack whack file server US 01 site 4, yeah, that's just a pain. But anyways, so we're going to call this file, computer name file, and all we do is we click OK. So the main thing we just need here is we need a computer account that we are going to connect our file server to. So now we're going to minimize this and we are going to go to the file server. Now again, depending on what your environment is, I am using a virtual environment here. These servers are connected with the internal network within VirtualBox. You can do this exact same thing. So if you have two physical computers, you install the server on both of them, you can connect them that way. So don't think just because I'm doing this virtually that it has to be virtual. This could either be virtual, this could be physical, you know, whatever. But anyways, so okay, so we're sitting here at the file server. So what we want to do is we want to go and we want to get our little search thing. And what we're looking for is system. So that's system. We now go to settings. And what we want to click on is system here. So this is what we are looking for. So system, you guys should be used to this. Gives you all the information. The main thing that we're looking for is down here that says computer name, domain, and work group settings. So what we're going to do is we're going to click change. And so this is a little bit different than the client computer, Windows 8 or Windows 7 or Windows Vista, is there's no wizard to this. You get this little change button, and that is it. I actually find this a lot easier. This reminds me of way back in Windows NT 4.0. But basically, you don't get any fancy wizard. What we're going to do is we're going to click on Change, and it's going to ask for the computer name up here. So I am going to change that to the computer name that we created in Active Directory Users and Computers. So File, then we're going to go down and it says Member Of. I'm going to select Domain, and my domain is ETCG. So whatever your domain is, put that domain in there, and we are going to click OK. So it's going to go, it's going to try to talk to the Active Directory server to say, hey, somebody's trying to add this server to your domain, is that okay? So then what it's now asking for is a user account within Active Directory that has permission to join servers to the domain. So in general, domain administrators can do this, but if you use organizational units and permissions and all that, you can have somebody else be able to add servers if you really wanted to. So anyways, but the username is administrator, and the password is the password, and we are going to hit OK. So it's going to go, it's going to see, goes to the Active Directory server, says, okay, this computer is trying to connect to the domain. Is it allowed to connect? Ask for username and password. As long as you put in the right username and password, it will say, welcome to the domain. And that's it. Okay. Now the big thing, again, remember with this Windows and servers, a lot of times you have to restart computers. So don't forget to restart computers, because if you forget to restart the computer, then you can have all kinds of problems because it won't connect to the domain properly and you'll have just weird issues. So it's going to have to restart. So we click OK. We close and we do the restart now. So basically during this restart process, it's going through and it's making all the modifications to this particular server so that it will connect to the Active Directory server and pull all the security policies and permissions and all of that stuff from Active Directory now instead of the local accounts. So depending on how fast your server is, the reboot time is either really fast, really slow. This one shouldn't be too bad. Let's see, it's clicking along a little bit. There you go. So it's applying security sessions, and there we go. So now all we have to do is Control-Alt-Delete to sign in. So I just need to insert the Control-Alt-Delete. If this is a physical computer, press Control-Alt-Delete, but since this is VirtualBox, I have to insert it. And then it is going to ask me to log in. Okay. Here's the extra credit question. Have you been following along with this track? What is wrong with this picture? Should I log in from this screen? If you said no, you're correct. Why? If you look up here to the username, you will notice it says administrator, but it wants to log into the local account. So it's the administrator account on file, the local computer. Since this is now part of the domain, we do not want to we don't want to be logging in using a local account. We want to be logging in using a domain account. So I hit this back button. I then go to Other User. Then here, this will automatically say ETCG. If it doesn't for some reason, I can do ETCG/administrator. And so what this does here at the beginning is it says, where should I look for the account? And then this is the account. So this is saying I should look at the domain for the administrator account. If I put in file here, it would look for in the internal computer instead of going to the domain. So ETCG/administrator, and again the password is the password. And so now it's logging in. Please wait, applying settings, blah, 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 blah. And now we're going to get to the server screen in a second or two. And so that's all it takes to add a server to the domain. Again, the server isn't going to do anything for you. Right now, it doesn't have any shared files, it doesn't have IIS, it doesn't have MS SQL, it doesn't have anything. It's just a server that is a member of the domain from this point, we now get to start playing with it. But I do just want to show you, if we go over back to the 2012, the Active Directory server, if we double click on File, we can see the information for File, and if you look at the Operating System tab, we can see that it's the Windows Server 2012 Standard, for us, Evaluation Edition. So that's all there is to adding a server to the domain. Again, seems pretty simple, but it's just one of those lessons that we have to teach you. So now what I can do, now that I have this server that is part of the domain, I showed you how to share files before. I showed you how to assign permissions to files. I showed you how to assign quotas to files, or folders. I showed you how to assign screens to folders. Now, what you can do is on this new server, this server called File, you can share a folder on the server called File, called Share. You can set quotas, you can set permissions, you can do all of that. And where I showed you those roaming profiles before, well, instead of putting those roaming profiles on the Active Directory server, you could store them on this file server. Now that it's a member of the domain, you can work with it just the same way as we have been working with the Active Directory server. So it is just there. Again, all you would be doing is for the UNC, instead of saying whack whack server, whack share, you would do whack whack file, whack share. Get what I'm saying? Again, we are going to be doing more stuff with this server. We're going to get all powerful and cool. But before we get all powerful and cool, I've got to show you how this is done. Because in general, and that's what you guys have to understand about the real business world, what you guys have to understand about the real technology world, is we really are limited by the resources that we are given, that we are granted by the organization we work for. Again, in the best of all worlds, every server should have a specific purpose, and it should be locked down tight in order to provide only that service. So if you have an IIS server, if you're going to be running a web server on your internal network, you should have a server that is only IIS, and you should lock that thing down. Lock the firewall down, lock the permissions down, lock the security down, so all that it can do is provide IIS services, because especially with your web server, that's a huge vulnerability on your network. So if a hacker can get in and compromise your IIS server, the hope is all that they would do is compromise that one single server. That is what we want to do. The IIS server, the file servers, the DNS server, the DHCP servers, the Active Directory servers. We all want them to be individual servers. But again, at the end of the day, if our organization gives us 2 servers, that's what we got to deal with. Again, in the real world, when you're buying servers, the least a server is going to cost you is somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000, and the average server is probably going to cost the organization about $5,000 to get it installed. So, again, as a C-level executives, when they're looking at it, $5,000 is a decent amount of money. I mean, that's for a lot of employees, that's 2 months' salary. So do they pay an installer, do they pay a worker 2 months' salary, or do they buy one server? Especially if you try to break all the services out amongst lots of different servers, you may not be talking about buying one server, you might be talking about buying 10 servers. 10 servers may be $50,000. So the C-level executive, right or wrong, they may decide they don't want to spend $50,000 for 10 different servers. They may think it's a waste of time, they may think it's a waste of money, they may be dumb, they may be stupid, it may be wrong-headed, but at the end of the day, right, they're the ones that sign the check. It's our job to make the systems that we have work. So that's what you deal with. So in the real world, again, in the perfect world, every server does its own service. In the real world, you get what you get, and you try to work with it. But this is how to add a server to Active Directory, and from here we can start adding all kinds of fancy stuff. And by putting it on this secondary server, we don't have to worry about anything we're doing affecting the Active Directory server. So with that, this class was adding servers to a Windows Server 2012 Active Directory network. I am Eli the Computer Guy, and as always, I enjoy teaching this class.